consciousness and providing community and connection and support here in the Bay Area, in San Francisco, Oakland, and Berkeley, also Petaluma. Just a little bit about me, what brought me to this work. I healed my addiction to pharmaceuticals and by using psychedelics. And here I facilitate psychedelic support groups for mental health and addiction recovery. And we also put on events with speakers and provide community here in the Bay Area and education and integration support. So it's just really important that we have a network of people that we can rely on and make friends and learn about these medicines and have a supportive connection while we go through these transformative experiences. So I look forward to being on this call today, and hopefully we can connect after with all of you.
Awesome. Thank you. And so we're going to do an opening prayer and meditation, right? That you're going to lead?
Yeah.
Cool. So maybe we want to just let our spines get straight and tall if we can and take on a meditative pose.
And I like to begin anything with just doing a falling out breath. And by that, I mean making a sigh or a sound on the exhale, and that just automatically relaxes the nervous system. So maybe we can do that in unity together. So let's take a deep breath in. Just letting go of our day, any stress it might have taken to get on this call. Making any sounds that you need to relax yourself or movements like So I'm going to start this off by calling in the 4 directions for this opening circle. I want to give thanks for today's sunrise, for the breath of life within us, for all of our creations. Hear our prayer. As the day begins with the rising sun, I ask that the sacred mushroom spirit be with us. Here we call in the 4 directions as one form of protection to add more power to the magic we are practicing as a way to feel connected to nature during this meditation. I'm calling in the 4 elements and how each element relates to psilocybin mushrooms, the effects, the cultivation process, and the journey space. Sacred mushroom of the East, where the Father Sun rises in the air. Guide my step and walk the circle of life with mental clarity, thought, open-mindedness, and learning. Firekeeper of the South, where the warm air comes to us. Be with us. Bring healing to all in need. Bring into balance the physical, mental, spiritual. Ignite passion, transformation, and strength, so I am able to know my place on this earth. Sacred mushroom keeper of the West, water, be with us. As each day passes, help us listen to emotions, fluidity, intuition, and love for myself and others, for the plants and fungi and all of Mother Earth's creations. Help us grow and nurture ourselves and love ourselves in all ways. Sacred mushroom of the North, the earth element, where the cold winds come from. Be with us. Help us walk our path with courage, grounding, patience, and growth. Let us remember the ancient tradition of ceremony and ritual. The plant and fungi kingdom offers unspoken wisdom to open hearts. Take time to slow down and feel the oneness. Wisdom lives in the stillness. Heal my body, heal my mind, bring light, joy, and awareness to my spirit. Aho.
Aho. That was gorgeous. I wasn't expecting to see myself surrounded by sacred mushrooms at all 4 directions. I was expecting all the directions, but I wasn't expecting the sacred mushrooms to be there too. So thank you. Did anybody have while we're interactive, did anybody have a reaction or a feeling when Danielle was reading that? Deep gratitude. Thank you.
Thanks, Joel.
Aw.
Love you all.
Haley Clark raised her. Should we allow Haley Clark raised her hand to talk? Wait, where'd she go? Haley, I unmuted you. No, nothing. Okay, well, very good. So yeah, I mean, I would even love to, I bet people would love to have that practice for themselves. But moving on, which is hard because I want to sit in that space for the next hour. I could just do that. But I wanted to talk with you about sort of the principles that I set up with my team around sort of some of the values and how we wanted to build the summit. And I wanted to run them by you and see how they have any place in the San Francisco Psychedelic Society, or, you know, what you think about them or how you build the society, because you are running one of the largest psychedelic societies in the country, if not the world. So that's a thing. And so I wrote a blog post yesterday on TAM integration where I list them. If actually, I will share my screen here for a moment. So the values, Danielle, is interactivity, right? We do want to have a possibility for attendees and presenters to engage in meaningful discussion. I know that a lot of people do have summits where they are all pre-recorded. And it was important to me that we didn't do that, that everything was live and that people could interact should they want. And I'm just curious how interactivity and, well, you know what I think of really, before I say that, I think of the old acid tests that the merry pranksters used to throw. And the acid tests really were the first time that there was a blurring between audience and the musicians, perhaps, and the audience, the people who were presenting what was happening and the people who were taking it in, that there weren't really stages in the same way, and there weren't people that had performance jobs in the same way. It's that they would show up and there would be instruments and there would be toys and light show equipment, and everybody could just participate in the way they wanted and find their own place and have a magical experience in the way that they created it. And so there's this real idea of, you know, people bringing themselves to the party and, you know, seeing what was there when they got there. And it was also very improvisational in that way. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
So at the Psychedelic Society, a majority of the events that we do are peer-led circles. We do integration circles several times a month. We have, like I mentioned before, psychedelic support groups for mental health and addiction. And there is not a hierarchy in that group. There is, of course, a facilitator, someone that holds the space for everyone, but everyone is equal in that group, and we all get the ability to talk and participate. And we do a monthly event where we do have a speaker, some expert within the psychedelic community, or someone that wrote a book, or perhaps we have a movie screening with a director, but we always have integration and breakout groups after each talk. So it gives the participants the ability to connect with the speaker, to connect with one another, and really process the downloads that came through and meet one another. Community and interactivity is definitely our predominant focus within the Psychedelic Society. And I believe so for all psychedelic societies across the world.
Right, that's what makes it a society.
Mm-hmm.
So the next one is accessibility. Um, and what this means is that we really wanted to create an opportunity for the greatest number of people possible to have access. We know that there are conferences all over the world. There was, an amazing conference called Breaking Convention that happens in London. There's conferences in Pittsburgh coming up. There's a conference called Horizons, which is a long-running conference in New York City. And that if you're in Tasmania, it might be hard to get to London. Or if you're in Russia, it might be hard to get to Pittsburgh. And so the idea of having a online summit means that people from all over can gather. And one of the things we did, this also speaks to interactivity, is that we created an online forum. So if you go to circle.tamintegration.com, if you bought an all access pass, you'll have access to a forum that we hope you use. That you'll be able to meet the people and start conversations, and that will be up for the foreseeable future. For as long as everybody is using it, it will stay. It will stay up. We're also we were talking to a few of the veterans groups. We were talking to Veterans for Natural Rights, and we gave them, coupons so they could give free tickets to veterans and things like that. We really want people to have this information and to have like as few barriers as possible to this. And so I'm wondering how that plays into the SFPS.
Yeah, so I wish more of our events were accessible online for people. We are hopefully focused on getting a lot of the videos from our events up online so people can watch. A majority of our focus is we do like a lot of online content where we share articles. We have a group, San Francisco Psychedelic Society. That's a global Facebook group where people can meet one another, talk about these articles, chat. And when it comes to our accessibility at our events here, all of our events are pretty affordable, low cost, sliding scale. We also offer scholarship tickets for low income and veterans, basically free for people that can't afford. No one's turned away for lack of funds. And all of our events, we make sure that they're accessible by public transit. And we really empower our community members to get involved. So we offer volunteer opportunities for people, and all of our facilitators are volunteers. Majority of our organization is volunteer run. So we really want to empower individuals and let everyone know that they can have a hand in this. They can grow within our society and really transmute their healing process into service.
Gorgeous. So the next one is diversity. Right? We really wanted to have the widest possible range of perspectives. And this is an exciting one because many of us have seen Michael Pollan's book, and many of us have kind of heard from, scientists and people of that ilk. There are a lot of other people who have a lot of things to say, and the diversity, is ethnic, and it's religious and cultural and geographical. And I understand, of course, that we all have become aware that we live in a bubble. We all have our own little bubbles, and that we're surrounded by the people that we're surrounded by. And so I've been working to kind of expand my circle. This has been sort of a call to action to meet new people and get new people involved. And there have been some wonderful friends who have introduced me to people I might not have otherwise met, who are brilliant and have so much to share. And I'm hoping that in the future that this just continues to grow. For example, if you're listening, India, I'm aware that there is a Psychedelic Society of India, and I've been hitting these guys up on Instagram, being like, please, I've been trying to get India to be part of this conference. They don't write me back. We're going to have to go there. We're going to have to go to Mumbai and get these guys online, because I don't know what they're doing, and I don't know how they're doing it, and I want to know. I have also been talking to, um, I have a Facebook friend who publishes a magazine about Mongolian and Siberian shamanism. And I reached out and I asked him, tell me about the mushroom shamans of Mongolia. Like, you got to put me in touch with a mushroom shaman in Mongolia. I want this guy on the summit. And he was like, no, they don't do that. So it's my sense that either he doesn't know that person or that he's protecting them in some way. He's lying to me. So I think the only thing to do is to go to Mongolia and find the guy. Um, I'm also aware that there is, and this kind of comes into cultural appreciation as well, is that there's a rich culture of use in Mexico, in the Mazatec Mountains, that there have been people using these mushrooms for healing and spiritual growth and religious purposes for generations. And so we have tried to get as close to that as possible. And, one of the problems is that the internet bring these teachings to people in a way that is, again, accessible, and also appreciate, and also very cultural appreciative, and hopefully reciprocitous with the people who live there. There is a speaker named Izzy. Izzy's one of the policy directors at MAPS, Policy Council. He's a lawyer. He's an attorney, and he's very concerned with ideas of sacred reciprocity. What does it mean to go to cultures and these mushrooms, these sacred mushrooms, are sort of everybody's heritage and birthright, but some cultures have been working with this more than others, and we want to learn from them, and we want to give and take in a way that is appropriate and respectful. And so, Danielle, if you want to talk about diversity and or cultural appreciation.
Absolutely. We encourage diversity at all of our events. Everyone is welcome. And people come from all walks of life, religious backgrounds, ethnicities, upbringings, addiction, non-addiction, mental health states, condition, ages, races, gender identities, the whole spectrum of people. Our next focus with the Psychedelic Society, once we incorporate as a nonprofit, we can start to have more groups, and we're going to start to have a queer integration circle. We're going to have a veteran support group, people of color, people of flavor circle. Also thinking about having a senior psychedelic group where seniors can come and talk about psychedelics and integrate their experiences together, a women's circle. And we're open to, if anyone has suggestions on circles they'd like to see for the community to engage in more diversity. We're also thinking about having a previously incarcerated support group using psychedelics. I think as these medicines become decriminalized, like we just decriminalized here in Oakland on June 4th, all sacred medicines and plants and fungi, Schedule I plants and fungi, and Berkeley's next, and hopefully San Francisco and Santa Cruz. So as they become decriminalized, I think more people are going to feel more comfortable to come out and seek community, seek education. And I would love to see this community get even more diverse than it already is. We also aim to keep our events diverse in their content by offering a wide range of topics, medicines, and speakers, medicines that we talk about. When it comes to cultural appreciation, this is something that I'm really excited we've been able to tap into recently. We just had a talk a few months ago with these indigenous leaders from Brazil, from the Hunikuin tribe. Daniel, you were there, and it was really amazing to bring.
It was so great.
Yeah, it was amazing to bring the wisdom of the forest, and they shared music, and we did a film preview of this film that's about the Hunikuin tribe, and they brought their jewelry and their sacred medicines, plant medicines from Brazil, to our community. So that was really important. And that's something we want to continue to do, is to really highlight on Indigenous voices, because that's where all this work comes from. That's the origin of this. And it's important, if we're engaging in this, that we're aware of it, not only aware of it, but we get to interact with them and ask them questions and support them, both supportively and financially. Another thing that we do, we have vendors at our events. So we're doing a peyote files event in October, and we're having a vendor from the Mycelial Center. They work with sacred peyote, and they have Mycelial art and jewelry. And so a majority of the proceeds will go back to the Indigenous community in Mexico. And we also have a vendor that sells Shipibo patterns, like the one on my wall, and different jewelry that comes from Peru and Colombia and Brazil. We have them at every event, and percentage of the proceeds go back to supporting the Indigenous communities. And one of our sponsors is Warmy Tea, and percentage of the Warmy Tea donations goes back to fueling the Amazon. So it's something that we want to continue to do. And if anyone has any ideas or input on that, we're super open. We're open to just learning and growing and supporting communities as much as we can.
Awesome. Thank you. The next one is open science. And so this has to do with a lot of the commercial interest, right? The commercial and pharmaceutical. This has to do with big pharma and their newfound interest in psychedelics. Some might say it's not exactly newfound, that big pharma and the military industrial complex has been interested in psychedelics for since MK Ultra, right? For almost military use. And there's an article that was released the other day that says the military is still working with psychedelics to almost take out some of the hallucinogenic properties and still keep some of the healing properties, which I think is strange. And, you know, various forms of who knows what. But the idea is that there is a lot of profiteering that is starting to happen. There are a lot of people who are doing research and developing products and methods, and they're keeping this stuff very secret, and they're keeping it under wraps, and they're doing it sort of out of a desire for, you know, power control and financial success. And so on one hand, you know, so the open science and open practice document was penned by the Center for Spiritual Practices, led by Bob Jesse. And then, you know, he worked with other people. And then there are many signatories to it, people who agree with it, that say that, again, these medicines are for the healing of the people. And that while it's reasonable that people should make money for their efforts, that there needs to be some sort of reasonable balance, and that the information should be shared, and that the methods for science should be shared, and the benefits should be shared with all of humanity. And so it's really important to me that we strike a balance, that that we live in a society, and we live in a society where there's always going to be a spectrum. There's going to be, you know, people on one end of the spectrum, there's going to be people on the other end of the spectrum. And there needs to be an amount of communication and cooperation where, again, the most amount of people are going to be taken care of, and that the people who are doing the work are reasonably taken care of as well. And so, you know, I'm a firm believer in the OSOP statement, and I will post a link to that in the forums. Right, so you have to go to the forums to get the OSOP statement, or you can search it, Open Science and Open Praxis. And the Center for Spiritual Practices website is also wonderful and brilliant. Danielle, thoughts?
Yeah. I just wanted to share the principles that come from the statement. I'm really grateful that you brought this up. So the first one is cooperation over competition, that we share materials, knowledges, best practices, and methods. The second is intellectual and scientific integrity. We affirm that we report the truth as we find it, not as we or others might prefer it to be found, that we will properly attribute the contributions of others. And in service, we're called to this work in the spirit of service. And that's definitely something that we highlight on over and over again, the importance of service and community. The next is open science and open praxis. We will not withhold materials or knowledge, experiences, observations, discoveries, methods, best practices, or the alike. We're really focused on sharing knowledge, sharing information openly. And that's what the psychedelic community has been about up till now, and we want to continue to preserve that. And the last is non-interference. So we will strive to place our discoveries into the public domain for the benefit of all. If we discover things about consciousness, we're not going to keep it to ourselves. We're going to share it for the betterment of community and for all. And what scares me a little bit about just like organizations like Compass that are keeping information private. I think it's really important that we keep this open source, open information, best practices for all, and don't keep anything to ourselves, because this is what this community has been built upon, and we should preserve that. I said that twice. I feel completely.
Say it again.
This is really important. This open source information, open practices, open education is what this community was founded upon, and we want to preserve that.
Thank you. So the last one is sustainability, is that we want to build systems and relationships to last. I wrote dedicated in systems and relationships that are built to last, which is actually a little bit of a shout out to the Grateful Dead. You know, we put in dedicated, and there's a Grateful Dead song called Built to Last. So that's a little bit of my bias. You know, it's a little bit of my history coming through. There are so many systems. It's easy to look around and see systems that are short-term and short-sighted and just extract value from the world and just leave it behind. And so it's important to me that we're not doing that. Yeah, there's a link. Thank you, Zane. So it's important that we don't do that. And I'm aware, right, that relationships are hard, and that they take work, and that people are different, and sometimes we butt heads. Danielle and I butt heads. But the idea is that, you know, if we're going to really live by psychedelic values, right, that we understand that there's a deep interconnectedness between us all, and that underneath all of the bullshit, pardon my language, is love and wisdom and consciousness, and that those things can, if we allow them, those things will permeate through our personalities and through our petty differences, and that if we keep kind of returning to those values, then we can continue building something that is built to last. And so there's that aspect. Also, the nice thing about the online conference is that the amount of fossil fuels is minimal, right? So it's not a, like, for example, I appreciate Burning Man for what it is, but it is it uses an enormous amount of non-renewable energy to process a Burning Man, right? And so the amount of fossil fuels it takes to run an online conference is minimal. And so thoughts like that is just putting into your mind, you know, putting into our mind is that how do we minimize our footprint? How do we minimize our footprint and just maximize the benefit, the amount, again, of love and wisdom and consciousness that's permeating through us, that we're channeling into the world. Danielle, do you want to share on that?
Yeah, I think that the way both of our organizations are set up is in a way that empowers individuals to build lasting connections and relationships. And because of the affordability, people can keep coming back and really feel a part of the community. And it's not like, oh, I'm just going to this one psychedelic event that costs a large amount and I'm not returning, or I'm not making friends there. They're so accessible that people are really feeling a part as a member, a contributing member of a community. And that makes the organization continue to sustain itself. We are hanging by a shoestring budget, but for some reason we keep plugging along, we keep going, and sustaining the accessibility. Another thing that we've really tried to focus on because of just the footprint that you were speaking to is having zero waste events. So right now we're having like a food vendor at our events, and they use all compostable items. We don't like to see a ton of trash and waste from our events. So that's something we're really trying to focus on in the future, is finding ways to make all of our events the lowest impact on the planet and have zero waste.
Fantastic. So thank you for all of that. Do you have any other thoughts before we just take questions?
I just want to say that I started with the Psychedelic Society almost 2 years ago, and I was feeling really lost, and I'm just coming out of my addiction, and I didn't have community, and I didn't have purpose in my life. And I just started volunteering. I started with volunteering with the Instagram, and I worked my way up in the organization. And I want to empower anyone on this call that feels the call to get involved in psychedelics. Start volunteering, start seeking out ways to be of service and help out, and really build yourself within this community where it's feels like sort of the infancy phase of the psychedelic community in a way. And I would love to see more people get involved, even starting groups, starting an integration circle, start a support group, even starting a psychedelic society. We do welcome questions anytime of ways that we got started. I'm happy to share different formats and practices with people. And I'd love to see this community grow throughout the planet. So I will
Awesome.
email.
Yeah, I've
What's up?
Oh, I was just gonna say it's been amazing watching it grow. It's been amazing to participate in the small ways that I've been able to. It's really lovely. Are there any other values that you feel like are important that we didn't touch on?
I would say privacy and just being aware that these medicines, although they are decriminalized in Oakland, most places throughout the world, they are still illegal. And just being mindful of that when seeking out medicines, when talking about facilitators, when just using platforms like Signal, and just being really careful, because I think that the more that awareness comes out, I would like to not see more arrests happen and people getting in trouble for engaging in this type of work. So just being mindful of the illegality and protection, protect our community, protect our members, protect our guides, our therapists, our facilitators. Don't speak, if you get mushrooms somewhere, don't share exactly where you got it from. And let's just keep this really contained and safe so that our community continue to flourish. And as these medicines go above ground and become decriminalized, I hope that we can really be able to expand that and not be so fearful in that way. But let's keep protecting our community as it stands. And also get involved in decriminalization efforts. With Decriminalized Nature, there's definitely hundreds of cities now that are engaging in decriminalized nature and implementing it at a local level. So if you're interested in decriminalizing psychedelic plants and fungi in your own city, I'm going to share the email below that you can reach out to, and you can start a movement in your own city. And thank you all for your openness and willingness to be a part of this. It's really a blessing to be in connection and community with you all.
So I thank you. And I have something from Joel. Joel pointed out something that I'd love for you to speak on. Harm reduction, the importance of harm reduction.
That's been huge, especially just in not only our community, but in the addiction recovery community. So harm reduction to me means, in the sense of addiction recovery, if you have an addiction to a harder medicine, but psychedelics are healing you, that's a harm reduction. That don't be afraid to engage in psychedelic work that might help your addiction. And also just sharing best practices about psychedelics, sharing information about psychedelics, open forum of education about these medicines, how they work, the best ways to prepare for them, the best practices in the journey. We don't look at it as giving advice. We look at it as sharing information that can help people change and transform their lives and really use these in the best way possible so that they are safe and protected and can continue on this path.
Right. And on that note, another thing about harm reduction that I think is very important that happens more it's almost like a part of festival culture in other countries that doesn't happen here because of the laws, and also doesn't necessarily have so much to do with psilocybin, because when you see a mushroom, you can tell that it's a mushroom. It's not going to be something else. But drug testing is that, there are test kits that are out there. And because we know about the opioid crisis and the issues with fentanyl and things of that nature, you don't always know what you're getting. It's what you think you have is maybe not what you have. And so, having someone in a community that has a test kit, is a really nice thing, and maybe something that should be implemented in more places in the future. Dance Safe, I know, if you look up Dance Safe, they're really big on information about testing and interaction.
Yeah, plug to Dance Safe, definitely. And I just want to speak really quick to Kayla. She said, I too come from a background including addiction. How can I educate people around me on the purpose and benefits of mushrooms without others assuming it's just a way to get high? Yeah, there's definitely a strong stigma. I still feel it all the time. Even in this recovery group, this is something we talk about a lot, how AA and NA have kicked people out for using psychedelics or speaking to how psychedelics have helped them. And first of all, psychedelics have been proven to be addiction interrupters, and they're non-addictive, especially sacred plants like mushrooms, ayahuasca, iboga, LSD, and they can repattern the brain. I like to think of it as, if you're having an issue with a pharmaceutical, and you're able to get off the pharmaceutical, yet your microdosing is helping, it's not an issue for you, that's okay. If that's working for you, that's okay. It doesn't matter what other people think. And we're just going to have to prove against the stigma by walking this path and being strong in this path and confident in this path that this works. And if other people have a preconceived judgment that you're just getting high, they can think that. Let them. And while you're healing and transforming your life and becoming a better person in service to this community and changing your own world and the lives around you. And I've just stopped really caring about the judgments that other people think and really providing community and support for people that are walking this path. And I think over time, we're just going to see the psychedelic movement grow and the judgmental sort of pharmaceutical enhanced community start to dwindle away.
I think that's an amazing point of a bit about the maturation of the psychedelic community, that it's really easy to have an idea in your head of just kind of the hippie or the dope head, or somebody who's not contributing, or is a drain in some way, or is burnt out or spaced out. And it's important, or even that they're part of a black market and that there's some sort of nefarious character. And what we have found is, overwhelmingly through our own experience, is that psychedelics inspire us to be better people. Psilocybin pushes our nose into our issue. It's almost like it rubs your nose in the places where you're not being true and ethical and kind and upright. And it encourages a continual growth towards being the person that you can be. And it's almost, I don't know, it's almost embarrassing, to sort of recognize how much you want to be a better person, and to be willing to kind of put away the old habits that were holding you down, that were, that the sort of the real peer pressure, and to sort of put down the old patterns that are keeping you from who you really can be.
And I think that the mushrooms, they speak to us and they communicate through us. For example, I know someone recently that smoked cigarettes for 15 years. And once she started microdosing mushrooms, she broke that addiction, and she wasn't even expecting to do that. The mushrooms were just communicating that was toxic for her body, and she didn't need to continue to do that to herself. They didn't want that type of energy in. Some people have expressed too that working with mushrooms, they've just become more mindful in their lives, more mindful of the food that they're putting in their bodies. And I think that just respecting the plant consciousness and knowing that the plants are, and fungi, they're living sentient beings, and they're just as important as us. I think they're almost more in control than we are. And we really have to surrender to that and come at them in a good way with respect and intention and love and appreciation. And if you're abusing mushrooms, I think the mushrooms will definitely communicate with you and won't allow it. Same goes for other plants like ayahuasca. Ayahuasca will not let that happen, from my experience.
It's almost like you can't abuse mushrooms. You can only abuse yourself with mushrooms. So we want to just be in a community that is more conscious and open-minded, and what would be more wonderful than to just be in a community of people who were growing like this? And so that's, I guess, what we're hoping is that by talking about the fact that it has been possible for us here, then that it's also possible for you out there. And that perhaps even through connecting on the forum, right? Another plug for the forum, that maybe even people who are in geographical proximity can maybe work on setting up a group that works for you. There's no reason that your local group even has to look like our local groups. There are Buddhists in New York City. There's a psychedelic Sangha in New York City, for example, and they talk a lot about Buddhist practice, and they really like psychedelic rock and roll. And their events look like so much fun. And they go to museums together, and they walk in the park, and they do light shows. And, their groups in the UK, they do it a little bit differently. And, there's a group in Nashville, I believe, and they do it a little bit differently. And so it's an encouragement to see what is the local flavor of your neighborhood, and just allowing, and not trying to control it, and just allowing the flavor of the neighborhood to express itself through the society.
Absolutely. So the importance of getting involved if you feel called. And as Brett stated, that he's fearful of law enforcement and broken criminal system than anything else, totally agreed. And I think that's also where these psychedelic societies and integration circles are important, is that we don't engage in medicine work in these circles, and no one can come to the circle to source medicine, guide ceremonies. It's really super squeaky clean. So there shouldn't be a reason why people, well, let me reframe that. I hope over time people feel more comfortable to come out and join these types of communities, even start their own type of communities without the fear of law enforcement. We've never had law enforcement at our events, knock on wood, but it hasn't been
that we know of.
That we know of, yeah, exactly. Because we're just providing community integration, support, connection.
Right. So that is, there's a bit of a line there, because I do know people who work in the underground, and there are people like us that work in the above ground, and it's probably safest for you that you pick. I wouldn't, I wouldn't suggest, creating a meetup group or a big website or making a big fuss if you're doing illegal things. You just pick one or the other.
Yep, exactly. I just saw someone create a meetup group for ayahuasca ceremonies here locally, and thought that was interesting. Again, we need to protect our community. If you come out like having a group, let's use mushrooms, and that gets busted, and you're involved in a psychedelic society, the whole psychedelic society comes crashing down. So let's just really be mindful and careful, come at this in a good way. Let's protect our community, because it does ripple out for everyone. And we are in this, it's very stigmatized still. We're still fighting the stigma. So we have to just be really mindful of that and careful how we represent ourselves, and just keep this organization flowing.
Awesome. Any other questions before we wind down? And does anybody have any, since this is the first one, does anybody have any technical questions as well? I want to make sure that we are paying attention to those sorts of needs as well.
I haven't seen any. I also just want to acknowledge, thank you to everyone for your honesty and your bravery, sharing your stories in this chat. I've seen a lot of stories about addiction and overcoming that, and it's really powerful. Our stories heal others, and through our stories, people can find inspiration to help and heal themselves. I also want to welcome people to continue sharing their stories in this chat. How have psychedelics helped you? How would you like them to help you? How have psychedelics, mushrooms specifically, helped your depression, your anxiety, your ability to function in this world, maybe your OCD? Or we're open to hearing your story.
Awesome. Yeah.
Brett asked, do you have experience stacking? Medicinal, psilocybin, vitamin B3, niacin. Depression, anxiety runs rampant through his family.
That seems, that's a little, we're going to be talking more about that kind of stuff later. I sort of feel like that's a little bit outside the scope with, 9 minutes left. But a good question.
Huge proponent of microdosing.
What's that?
I'm a huge proponent of microdosing, and I think it's a helpful tool. And Paul Stamets stack, especially combining with lion's mane, is awesome.
Awesome. I do like lion's mane. Somebody asked if these are recorded. Yes, these talks are going to be recorded, and this is being recorded right now. Although I spaced and we lost like the first 2 or 3 minutes, but we definitely got your prayer. And I did get some other questions that people would like access to that.
Yeah, where can I share that?
You can I can either email it to everybody, or I can put it in the forum, or, we could do it any number of ways.
Great. I'll send it to you.
Yeah. And we'll get it out in the email. We'll get it out in the forum. Will we be able to access the recordings at a later time? Yes. You'll be able to access these recordings at a later time. And let's see what else. How do I watch from the beginning if I missed it? So these are all being recorded. And then depending on how much manpower, woman power, people power there is, they're going to get up on the website as soon as possible. And that might be a little bit tonight and tomorrow, and it will probably be, most of it will get up next week.
Someone commented, can you comment on the betterment of well people? I think that was the betterment of all people. These many that come to this work are not well. And I know I was not well when I came to psychedelics, and through working with them, it helped me get well. Healers need healers, and healing healers. Exactly.
Right on. Thank you. You're welcome.
You're going to have a discussion about microdosing on this summit?
One of the speakers was going to talk about microdosing, and then they pivoted. So I thought I scheduled, and I apologize, because I know that that's a big issue, and we might even have to just come around. We might have to come around with another conference that just kind of focuses on microdosing, because I'm getting a lot of emails. I'm aware that people are really, really interested in it. And yeah, like I said, I thought we were going to have a microdosing talk, and the speaker pivoted, and I let them because I'm laissez-faire like that. You know, if a genius, it's sort of my feeling that if a genius wants to be a genius in you have to just let them. So there's a lot of like allowing people to do what they would like to do. I'm sure microdosing will come up as a topic scattered throughout many of this talks, but as far as my specific microdosing talk, that is not happening, unfortunately, and I apologize. Is there some info on giving psychedelics to dying patients? I think that that's an interesting topic, and one of the things that I will say is that there is a test pilot roundtable coming up. The test pilot roundtable is a bunch of people who have done John Hopkins studies, right? We've talked a lot. We've seen a lot of the research presented by the scientists who are working at John Hopkins, but we haven't heard a lot from the people who have taken the studies. And so the interesting thing, we're talking about different flavors of groups. The Baltimore Psychedelic Society is, you know, where John Hopkins is at university. If you're not familiar, they do a lot of these studies. And so the Baltimore Psychedelic Society has a lot of people who were part of these studies. One of the studies was a end-of-life anxiety study. And they did find that end-of-life anxiety is often diminished when, you know, with the use of psilocybin, which is really, really cool. If you're interested in death and dying as well, I would tune into Catherine McLean, who's speaking on Friday night, because she's very interested in death, dying, and grief and psychedelics, and she will probably talk about that as well. You might also want to look at the life of Aldous Huxley, who wrote The Doors of Perception, and he left his body. He took medicine and moved on to the next place.
Yes, and Louis Schwartzberg, thank you, Stephen, for mentioning that. There's a new movie coming out called Fantastic Fungi. They're having screenings all over the country, and you can actually go on their website, fantasticfungi.com, and have a screening in your city. They're going to be coming here on October 10th in San Francisco. It's a film with Paul Stamets. Louis Schwartzberg made this movie, Moving Art. He's been working on this mushroom cultivation movie for about 10 years, and it's all about mushrooms and the mycelial network beneath us. And there's different experts that come on to talk about them, like Paul Stamets and Michael Pollan, and I think Rick Doblin might be in the movie. I'm not 100% sure. Check that out, fantasticfungi.com.
Yes, the trailer looks amazing. I'm really looking forward to that. So with just a few minutes left, let's just take a moment to kind of breathe into the mycelial web of participants. So we called in at the beginning of the talk, we kind of centered ourselves within the 4 directions, finding ourselves protected and guided by the sacred mushrooms of the east, south, west, and north. And now as we kind of just take that into our heart for a moment, just kind of notice that all of us are in community, even though we are separated by space, by massive distances in some cases, that there is an interconnected, just as the technological web connects us, that the web of the heart connects us as well. And so just breathing into your heart and feeling the web of care and concern, just reaching out to all of the other people on this call, and then even expanding beyond the people on this call, all of the practitioners everywhere and all of the people who could even benefit from practice, the people who are suffering from lack of care and concern. And just taking a moment to allow yourself to be a part of all that and a contributing member of all of that, recognizing that your love makes a difference, your care and concern makes a difference. and just taking a moment to bless the whole world. All right, and namaste. Thank you so much. We will see you in the next talk. Thank you so much, Danielle. I will check in with you soon. And may we all be blessed.
Much love, everyone. Please reach out to us on our social media. Thank you so much, Daniel, for all of your energy, effort, care, love to put this summit on. I know it's a lot of work, and it's the first ever psilocybin online summit. I hope to see many more of these, and I'm just grateful for you and all the work that you do in the psychedelic community, all the circles that you run, the support that you give, the events that you put on. It's awesome, and I feel so blessed to be a part of this.
Thank you. I feel the same way. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you.